is Mr. Tate Garcia. Tate is a student of Jeanette Windsor.
Okay.
And is currently a student at Tidewater Community College. And Tate is going to be performing for us this afternoon the Chopin etude in E major.
seat? No, you can sit. Yeah, you can sit. I'll stand. Can everybody hear me okay? Excellent. Beautiful playing tape. Thank you. Thank you. That was really, really lovely. Okay, so you said this is, so let's share some of what we were chatting about before you came up. This is the first Chopin etude that you worked on, right?
First Chopin,
and why did you choose this etude?
I've worked on this one before. I've never learned the whole thing, but I've learned bits and pieces from it.
Yeah.
From I used to have an electronic keyboard, and I would learn from that and work on that.
Well, you have a beautiful sound having worked on this on an electronic keyboard. So we're sort of limited on time. I'm going to let Marguerite sort of be my flag for when we're. So I have 3 things I want to talk to you about. 3 things I want to focus on right now.
Yeah.
Layering in the opening theme. Okay. The quality of your louder sounds. You have such a beautiful core to your soft sounds, and I want to see if we can inject some of that so that some of your louder sounds have the carrying value of your softer sounds, but aren't harsh, okay? Especially on such a beautiful instrument, I think that there's some room that we can explore how to get those sounds.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is some of your pacing, especially as you're getting back into the very end when the opening theme comes back, your pacing of that smorzando poco rallentando. Okay, so that you're like keeping us in the palm of your hand and leading us back to the beginning of this theme coming back. So when I talk about layering, what do you think I'm talking about in this opening?
The chord layers.
So tell me, keep going. Tell me more about that.
So basically layering like the melody and
something
like.
Yes, and how many layers do we have in this opening?
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Maybe, yeah. Okay, where's your 5th one? I see only 4. It's kind of like a chord. Right there. So we've got just play your melody note. For us, play your accompanimental vocal, your sort of secondary melody note. Yeah, so your D sharp, right?
Yes, D sharp.
Yeah, and then we've got this play your inner, the do, 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 do. Yeah, so there's our sort of tenor voice. And then what's our last voice? What does your left hand play? If we were to turn this into a chorus, exactly. Right, exactly. So when we're thinking about this layering, obviously we're not playing all of these voices equally as in the same dynamic, right? Or in the same, even in the same sense of expression.
Yes.
So which voice do we want to hear most? If we had to hierarchize.
Melodic one.
Yeah. And then what do we want to hear second most, maybe?
Second.
What's our second most important voice?
Bass.
I totally agree. And how about the stuff that's in the middle? What's the function of that? Yeah, what is that doing for us?
That's just providing like little legato lines.
I agree. For me, that's the motor. That's what keeps if we didn't have that, it would be very hard to keep this moving. But when it's there, we don't want to hear it. We don't want to have our ear drawn to that. So what I'm wondering is if in the way that you're playing this right hand, if we can, and of course, Chopin does not, this is why it's an etude, right?
Yeah.
Which fingers are playing that inner voice? Our heaviest fingers on our hand, in the loudest area of the piano, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it's very easy to turn that sound like some of the soundtrack music from Pride and Prejudice. So, but here it's not that important. Here it's much less important. So what I'm wondering is if you can structure your right hand in a way that what I'm hearing is like an operatic soloist, still piano, and the rest is like the orchestra playing underneath. Much better. So, but yes. So what you changed that I love is that your inner voice is so much softer and more supportive, but you can still lean on that melody even more. What I like to think about, what's our dynamic in the opening?
Piano.
That's exactly right. But that doesn't mean that we play every single component piano, does it?
No.
That means that some components need to be slightly stronger, and other components need to be slightly less, so that the composite is piano, right?
Yeah.
So thinking about that, how would you change what you did? Just to give you another idea.
Yeah, just,
are you okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Good? All right. So here's what, when I play this opening, what I like to think about is that my melody voice is almost mezzo forte. It's been a while, clearly. And I don't even like the way that I played that. I think that bass could be even more. Nothing's getting in the way of the bass down there. Take them on back.
All right.
There you go.
Do that.
Can you see? So
No.
please don't play it the same way. Nobody should play the same way as somebody else. Play it the Tate way.
Yeah.
But how far towards the back of this space can you get that melody voice to go? It's okay. That was my fault. I planted it in your ear. Beautiful. F sharp. G sharp. There you go. Take your time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2. Take your time. Good. How'd that feel? And how do you feel like it? What did it change? And is it in a direction that you like, or what would you remember when somebody's teaching you that? It's always you are a strong enough musician that you get to decide. My teacher would say, hold on to some and let the rest go out your other ear.
I think that it's better to like do like this, like
Tell me.
have the melody like this, but also.
That's beautiful, but I think you're doing exactly what we're talking about. That's good.
So kind of like a crescendo, decrescendo.
But what's different even than just in your approach to dynamics is the way that you're organizing the sounds within your right hand, within both hands, but in your right hand. You're bringing out, you're creating a space for that right hand to bloom over everything else much better. That's wonderful. So just an idea to plant. When we're thinking about Chopin, it's not in the same, we don't think about Chopin's writing necessarily in the same way that we think about Debussy's writing or Ravel's writing, where we're really thinking about, they've got all these layers, but Chopin is the way that Chopin is thinking vertically is here in particular, but really everywhere in his music, is very choral. And not every voice in a chorus is equally important.
This etude kind of makes me think of like, how waves come in and out, like when you're on the ocean, like you get bigger waves and smaller waves, like in the first opening thing.
I agree. And are you talking about in particular the way the
like just the way like the melody sounds?
The sound or the pacing? Very good. And the wave goes out, right? Very nice. Let's talk about some of your loud sounds now. Will you, let's see, where can you start? How about when that exact theme that you just played comes back about 5 bars later, and then we're getting into the, let me pick a note. I want, that's where I want to aim for that, but don't start right there. How about if you start from, so we're crescendoing, which means that this next bar is a little bit louder, and now, what I'm seeing in your approach to the way that you're playing this, what I admire about the way you play Tate is that you keep your fingers it's like you're baking bread. You're keeping your fingers very close to the keys. That's an excellent, that's the way I was taught. That's the way my technique is, so that you can feel where to go next, right? Yeah. But whether a pianist is visually impaired or not visually impaired, that is an excellent way to approach the keyboard, because so much of what we do is choreography and has to cover, we have 88 keys to cover in a large wingspan, right? Yeah. And so getting that close and feeling where we're going is really important, and that I attribute part of that approach to the beautiful core to your soft sounds. But what I just saw, and I admit that part of this is probably, what's the articulation for that section that you just played? Yep. What's the articulation there, Tate?
Articulation, accent.
Almost. It's phrased. There's a slur, and then each 16th note has a dot. And you're playing that very well, but I wonder if rather than coming at the key from above and having a strong attack above the key, if you can let the release of the note be the source of your articulation. So keep your fingers, may I touch you, is that okay? Keep your fingers as close to the keyboard as you can, but let the dot come from the way you release the key rather than the way you attack the key. Don't think about a loud dynamic. Just play it like you want to get a beautiful sound, like you're digging your hands in mud, like we're So what did we change that solved the puzzle a little bit, that got the sound that I was asking you to get? Yeah, leaning off of that, which makes sense, right? That's the loudest part of the keyboard, and so it's going to overpower everything else. But do you want to know a secret?
What?
I'm not a physicist, but when we are playing octaves as keyboard players,
the low notes tend to be a little more louder.
But the low notes help give carrying power to the high notes. So if we have a medium sound in our low notes that helps the higher notes project. That's why when singers are singing a large interval, they're taught to sing into the low note and then bounce up something like that. They lean into the low note. Well, we can think of that same concept in piano music, even though it's a completely different approach and technique. If you're leaning off of that bottom note just a little bit, having that note be resonant but less strong is actually going to make the entire chord sound stronger. It's going to help all of the strings resonate more fully. So do that one more time, except this time, I want you to think about leading towards the end of this phrase. Da, 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 da. And then when you get there, I want you to take the time to place it so that your fortissimo has core, still pings is voiced to the top note, but I want you to make the most beautiful sound you can. No sharp attack anywhere on that note. You can start a little bit louder than that if you want to. Good, but for me that's about knowing how much sound you can get out of the piano. That was about a mezzo forte. So I still want a fortissimo sound, but a carefully curated round fortissimo sound. Better, except the last note, I don't want it, so rather than coming down like that, I want to hear like you're aiming for this, right? Yes, like you're pushing through, and yes, that's better. Using your whole body, your shoulders down, using not just your fingers and your arms, but your back and your chest, and leaning in and giving all of the weight that you can from the key. May I demonstrate to you? So this is where when we practice on a nice piano, this is where I spend all of my time. You've got that stand right there. You go.
Yeah,
So when you're let me make sure I'm not going to play all sorts of wrong notes. So the notes it's almost like that chord, come on back. I'm right here, there you go. It's almost like the notes that are leading up to that are getting you to that sound. That sound has to result from the notes that come before it. But it's still, you're coming from the key, no above attack, and you're just leaning into that with all of your weight. You got it, there you go. Better. And why don't you take your time? You got a retenuto there. One more time. I'm going to play up here with you. Yeah. With your magnificent ears, is when I'm creating a loud sound, what part of my body is contributing to that loud sound? There are sounds in certain composers. In Prokofiev, for example, a sound with a little bit of edge to it could be highly appropriate. It could be. It's possible. But in this music, there has to be that level of roundness to it that comes from keeping our fingers super glued to the keys and not pushing, but just sort of, I don't even know what the word is. I don't know a word in English that tells, it's just inviting the sound out of the instrument. That's a long string that you've got to get to vibrate. And it takes time and it takes really careful voicing. So let's look at that last spot. So just ideas to plant as you're continuing to work. I would love to hear, as you're getting into the end, 2 or 3 or 4 maybe even measures before the main theme comes back, where you've got these in the left hand. Do you know a good spot to start around there? Good. Can this sound be a little bit more sparkling, have a little bit more core to it? Think about where you've come from. You've come from all of this terrifically virtuosic technique. And now you're just keep telling the story. Let the story, let it sparkle a little bit more. That's better. Beautiful sound. Let that left hand come up. There you go. Everything that you did to lead in. So for me, this is like we've been through a battle. We've been through something terrific. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a good terrific, maybe it's bad terrific. But when we get back to this theme, I want to hear that we've been through something terrific by the end. It's like we're coming home. And that lead in needs to show it. Go ahead. Some things I want you to think about are, what is Chopin communicating to us through the articulation that he writes? Okay? Why are certain things slurred but dotted? Why are staccato but slurred? What does he mean by that? And then, insofar as these other, so he's throughout all of this hard stuff, all the chromatic stuff, he's got these two-note slurs. I wonder why. And then the sound. For Chopin's music, there is it's the most luscious, tasty, delicious pianistic sound, maybe of all the composers, maybe except Brahms. But it's one of those sounds that we all search for our entire lives. And so as you're thinking about it, one thing that you can do is that you can just sit down and ask yourself, how many sounds can I get out of this one loud chord? How many ways can I voice this loud chord, this fortissimo chord, this forte chord, in order to get 16, 18, 27, 3 different sounds? So as you're working on it, always come to it with a fresh idea and, think about it as deepening your approach to the instrument, not just the piece. But that was a beautiful start. Thank you for playing. Beautiful job.
Always tough to be the first one to go.
But then he's done.
Get to sit back and relax.
That's true.
Yep, you're next, Eric. Our next performer this afternoon is Mr. Eric Wittgauer. Eric is a student of Galena Eppelman, who is unfortunately not able to be with us today. Eric is going to be performing the Gershwin Prelude number 3 in E flat minor.
Eric, do you have another copy of your music or just the one?
Yes.
Here's your phone.
Thank you.
Thank you much.
There's one in there.